The propaganda's a win, stress feeding on my tension. My countrymen, they love their fiction. The words upon now is made with good intentions.
Welcome to 10200, the Media and Politics podcast. So much news once again. I'm joined by Philip. How's it going, Philip?
Kia ora, ni hao. Things are going well. Yeah, living the life of the rich, the rich and famous in Auckland. How are you?
Oh, same here. We're rolling in cash from our offshore billionaires.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, as a co-founder of the party
Yeah,
of the organization,
yeah,
we've got money coming out our ears. Patreon and the summary. Click on it. Give us some money to keep doing independent media because
please.
counter to the belief of whomever, there's actually very little money in this, and we're not being funded by China or Russia. Unfortunately, I would take that money in a heartbeat. Big Petroleum, give us that money. We'll do some product placement. Who else? OpenAI? Hell yeah.
100%.
Let us turn that money into revolutionary further. That's the kind of machine we are.
That's the kind of integrity we maintain and
Yep,
line.
absolutely. We can take all kinds of blood money and end up on the side of moral good.
Look,
That's what I hear anyway.
the government may have reopened offshore oil to search, and we don't have any oil in New Zealand, but what we do have is unplumbed depths of moral depravity for you to sink your money into. So if you have $70 million going swimming, chuck it to us. We'll plumb the depths of embarrassment for you instead. How about that for
Wonderful.
a metaphor?
Wonderful. And we're starting at such a moral high ground.
Mm,
We're right up there on the high horse
exactly.
that we've got a long way to go. We've got a long way to go. A lot of money needs to be burnt to get us right down there. So this week, Israeli atrocities, they've been going for 80 years, longer. But yeah, I guess every week you just get stuff which is like, this is worse. We've done it again, folks. They fired on a hospital again. The tanks in southern Gaza and Khan Yunis firing on NASA hospital in what turns out to have been a triple strike, first strike and then two simultaneous strikes that killed journalists, support workers, medical workers, in contravention of everything that Israel is saying, oh, it's an accident again. And Western media, once again, just publishing that as a both sides edition, without kind of pointing out. And every time that Israel says this, it's been a lie. We are seeing a slight shift in the media mood. I don't trust it at all. It was a CNN investigation who have been fucking rank, honestly, in regards to their coverage of what's happening in Palestine. But it was a CNN investigation that figured out the kind of munitions details of this one. Yeah, and basically was able to reveal that this was a coordinated attack. This was the intent, was to double tap or triple tap the site to murder civilians, to murder the aid workers who were running to save the people who'd been initially hit, which is like up there in terms of war crimes. But it's also nothing new. This is an occupying force that more than sufficient evidence that they're targeting children with snipers. That they choose different body parts to target during a week to cause injury in a context where they've basically removed all medical support or medical infrastructure. The intent is to make people suffer, not just to genocide them, but to make things as horrific as possible.
Well,
It
that attack,
just
that was the one quote partially functioning hospital in the region, right? That they hit, and the reason people talk about double tap attacks, if people aren't kind of steeped in the history of kind of war crimes, is because there's no justification for them. Like the to get kind of international law-y about it, the principle of discrimination means that you can't legally, even during wartime, target medical or civilian personnel, and that's you expect to find after the first quote unquote tap, right? So the entire concept of a double tap, for those listening, is hit a zone and then wait long enough for people to come to help, and then hit the people who come to help. It's the anti-Mr. Rogers school of committing war crimes. So
I want to know what the Mr. Rogers School of committing war crimes is now.
Oh, well, it's you look for the helpers and then you don't shoot them in the head. Whereas this is the you look for the helpers. There will always be people who are helping and then genocide them. So yeah, that's why the history of kind of double tap as a phrase, as a kind of a pejorative for that tactic, has this kind of taint to it for good reason, because that's who comes, right? Think of it in like a local context. If someone gets hurt, an ambulance comes, blowing up the ambulance is not an appropriate way to conduct yourself, even during wartime, is the theory, right? Whereas that's become normalized a little. I think we can become a bit kind of immune from the horror when this like daily Holocaust continues on our screens. But when the US was discovered to be conducting double tap operations in Afghanistan, that was considered to be like a moral aberration, and people were rightfully kind of outraged in the establishment media 20 years ago.
How
Whereas
far we've come.
part of doing business, right? That's just people don't even address that on the kind of apologist side of this quote unquote debate. It's yeah, it's horrific, you know. The Holocaust continues unabated, if anything, accelerated with enthusiastic participation of the most powerful country in the world and their allies.
Yeah, and we have, once again, like very openly, members of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, saying we're going to annex the entirety of Gaza. It's going to be under Israel's control forever. We're going to wipe everyone out. I think the latest to say caught saying this, but they don't give a shit, is Bezalel Smotrich, has been like a key figure for this kind of rhetoric over the course of the last 2 years, just openly reported in all Israeli media, but once again struggling to find a home for this genocidal rhetoric to be condemned in Western media, which, like all all Western media, essentially all establishment Western media has been complicit in this genocide, and that continues even as we start to see that very slight shift towards being critical in some places, with one or two stories which they can then point at and say, no, but look, we were doing both. We were doing this investigation while also platforming Netanyahu. Just yeah, I don't know. There was a seems to have been a letter that was an open letter pushed around in New Zealand in the last week or so with a bunch of media professionals, a lot of indie media people, which is great. Signing it, calling on Luxon and other people in the government to condemn what was happening in Gaza regarding the targeting of journalists, which we love to see. As late as that comes, I think the only other open letter I remember seeing was really early on from Maori media, who put one out within a couple of months of October 7th. A couple of those names also on this new one, which I think was published on Asia Pacific Report. But even then, I found it a little bit lacking. And there were some media workers on there who are directly responsible for the editorial direction of their organizations, who are now adding their name to the list of people. Are very much everyone will have always been against this, trying to cover their own asses. We saw what you did. You're already a lot of these people are already in the accountability archive, right? For those who don't know, there's out of the UK, among other places, a digital archive that you can submit articles, video, etc., to, which shows media, politicians, etc., using genocidal rhetoric, or doing journalistic malfeasance, I think is the term that they use in covering the genocide. A fair few of like our journalists are in there now, let alone our politicians. And like, my hope is a reckoning will occur. One of the big issues here in New Zealand, for those unaware of the way that a lot of things work, perhaps you're overseas or perhaps you just aren't involved, which is very fair, is that New Zealanders are horribly conflict averse. So a lot of people have risen into decision-making roles by being pretty cutthroat, pretty nasty, and then they just kind of create a culture of that, and no one says anything. And this is why when people say, "Oh, they're good journalists as well." Okay, why aren't they doing anything, right? Like, oh, you're doing an open letter now, but like, what were you doing in your newsrooms? Like, and if I put a call out about this last week, but if there are people doing this stuff, if you're in media, and you are trying to fight your editors or your CEO or whomever to get better coverage and better, i.e., like even factual coverage of the genocide in Gaza or in Palestine, because the West Bank is just becoming as horrific now, then
Tell
tell people about it. Like,
yeah,
let us know so we
tell
can give you
people.
support because there's huge public support
Yeah.
for to free Palestine. Like,
That's
yeah.
I mean, that's the popular position, right? That's what has, as you know, always annoyed me about like the positionality of and the way these things are kind of presented as, in a New Zealand context, this is entirely locally. I think establishment media treats this as kind of two minorities of the population who are deeply entrenched in their beliefs, and there's no crossover and no kind of mass appeal,
They
hence
said this in the RNZ investigation. You know, they pointed to this.
yeah. Hence the relegation to, kind of minority status in the news briefings or whatever. Like doesn't tend to lead the 1 o'clock Channel One news, right? Because they think there's what a few percentage of the population who are quote unquote pro-Palestine and a few percentage of the population who are quote unquote pro-Israel, and that's how things have always been, and that's the kind of liberal both sides, and we can just kind of wash that away. But that's not what the data shows, right? The centrist, i.e., majoritarian position is massively, massively pro-Palestine and pro-freedom and justice for the Palestinian people, and has been for a long time. And that's only obviously accelerated and become a hugely popular, overwhelmingly popular position to the point that now quoting without, heavy, heavy kind of contextualization, anything that the Israeli war machine, whether that's the IDF or the government, is
Or the US.
or the US, like there's almost no difference between these parts of the machine at this point. Quoting any of their claims at this point, after literally hundreds of them have been shown to be outright lies, is massive journalistic malfeasance. So, like, what are you doing? The kind of common sense, everyday man on the street position is to disbelieve anything they say because we have good fucking reason to do so, right? You'd have to be a complete idiot who has never seen a fucking news article before to quote, this thing has happened, the IDF says this. Like that shit is so, so, so far beyond the pale now. And it's just dumb. It's not just evil, it's also dumb. Because like people have seen what you've been doing for the last 2 years in high kind of technicolor, but before that for decades. And you're only really doing yourself down into disrepute at this point. Like there was a strike, Israel strikes Yemen after Houthis fire a new type of missile came out a couple of days ago. And it really just kind of, I think, rubs salt in the wound that the Houthis are the only local external resistance, really, at this point, to the Israeli war machine, and need to be considered as a humanitarian intervention in the region. If you're at like think back 20
If
years
you
ago,
believe in the Genocide Convention,
this is what I'm talking about. Like the Israeli state, if you were someone who thinks that, foreign humanitarian military intervention is a thing, the only state that is operating according to that kind of laws of war framework from the 2000s is Yemen because they are militarily intervening in an ongoing genocide in order to protect a targeted people. So where's the coalition of the willing, right? I don't see Judith Collins and Christopher Luxon and Mark Mitchell standing up and beating their chests and saying, get some guts to Labour. We need to be sending some, I don't know, beat up old kind of tanks to Yemen to support their humanitarian intervention in an ongoing genocide. Like that's how international humanitarian law, in theory, could be working, right?
I've never seen that we've even pulled our troops back from helping the US in the Red Sea.
No, we are anti-Yemen. We're attacking the one country who's doing justified humanitarian intervention. Anyway, this could become an entire rant about this, but I just wanted to mention that it just shows the hollowness that, humanitarian law has always been about power and not about humanitarianism.
Yeah, and we've covered that a fair amount of times on the podcast as well, and it's just becoming clearer and clearer as far as, the international rules-based order still exists. Probably don't appeal to that in your open letter. The other major way that media has justified this, like this type of framing, was also captured in the RNZ investigation, which was to say that, Israel has more in common with New Zealand, and so we share their Western values or whatever the fuck they like to say. And so people are more likely to find interest in Israeli narratives or like views of the conflict, which is just like what values? Like in loving genocide, like
It's doing
torturing
lived
people.
it's doing lived experience as a genocider myself.
And just out earlier in the week, we've seen that even the US is significantly of the belief. Half of America thinks Israel is committing genocide in Gaza now, and only 35% disagree. That's less than that's like less than who voted for Trump. Like
Yeah.
we're getting into a a point where the reality is incredibly removed from what media are purporting it to be in terms of giving a both sides narrative. And again, this is something we've talked about previously, both in terms of media decision makers, media leadership, political leadership, business leadership, and are just galloping away from the electorate. The the gap between electorate or public sentiment and elite would I use the word elite, or is it too like far right coded now? Or like just or power, the gap between power and the public is just immense at this point because they've just been radicalized to such an extent, the
Mm.
people who hold the reins of power. And something will give at some point, but I suspect not to be too nihilist that well, no, we already know Gaza is gone. Like everyone watching, listening to this podcast will have seen the satellite images of Gaza, right? Like they're starting to destroy towns in the West Bank, right? If you heard our podcast, our midweek podcast last week with Marty, who had been in the West Bank, settlers would just go in and destroy like a village or a town. They just like level it. And I think this week as well, something like 8,000 olive trees. They just go and just like destroying them. Destroying olive trees is genocide. I want to be really clear about that. Like that kind of act is part of the genocidal intent of the Israeli state.
Yeah,
Woof.
it's destroying the culture and the means of reproduction of that culture, which is yeah, sounds very fairy, but it's not. It is part of the puzzle, which is destroying an entire civilization. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. Look at a picture. It's pretty fucking clear and disgusting. And yeah, you're right. The position of the vast majority of humans is pro peace and pro freedom, and that's not the position of people who hold power. Like I saw someone, I can't remember who. I wish I could attribute this, but I can't. I saw someone on Twitter say it's getting to the point where a non-insignificant percentage of Democrat voters who support Israel are in elected positions because there are so few Democratic voters now who would identify as quote unquote pro-Israel that the vast majority of those people increasingly are going to be people who have already been voted in,
Far
grandfathered
out.
by the fucking gerontocracy, whether that's, locally or federally. But you get the point, right? It's such a minority position at this point that the way that the media as an institution treats it is so far out of step, so far out of step.
Yeah.
And
And I think it's just a good reminder to all of us that as much as it purports to be, or as much as we hold like a torch for journalism, the role of the media historically has never been for like your on the beat reporter going and holding power to account, right?
mm,
Like
mm,
then no one forget like the New Zealand Herald was created to
mm,
warmonger,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
back in the 100 years ago. It wasn't, media apparatus are also propaganda apparatus.
mm.
And I think that's a pretty easy position to take. They're not objective. And the fact that they claim they're objective or like that they have this kind of positionality that puts them above that stuff is a red flag.
Yeah, and the kind of the Walter Cronkite metaphysics, I guess, or like the understanding of the world that's like don't laugh at my brilliant phrase that I invent. Just the idea that someone kind of sits down and tells you the just the facts, man, kind of thing, and then you can make your own decision on it. That's a very like historically contingent recent invention, right? Like if you look back past the last 60 years, that wasn't really a thing. We've always had like heavily biased and funded media from rich billionaire scions who compete over conflicting truths back to, industrial era and before. That's what the media was, someone pays some $1 million to get a certain position out there. And that's not the quote unquote truth that people can make a decision on. You
If the
pick,
workers don't own the printing press,
yeah,
how are they going to get the stuff printed that they want?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've been in a historically unusual time in terms of what journalism's been seen to be and what it's been inculcated into the kind of popular consciousness as. But it's not that. That's like it's becoming increasingly the case, and it's going to continue to be an uncomfortable realization, I think,
Yeah.
as slop and lies become just normalized and people continue to watch the dog dunking on us and say, "Hey, wait a minute. There's nothing in the rule book that says dogs can't lie. You know what I'm saying?
I think it's significantly a liberal tradition as well, right? Just this idea that these kind of lights of truth and justice are out there, working hard for Jeffrey Bezos. Okay, mates. However, one one journalist who just stumbled into doing some really good. No, that's probably unfair. I have no idea who this guy is, but it was pretty funny. It's Ethan Griffiths over at News Talk ZB, who was like, I think first couple of days on the job and saw Cash Patel in the parliamentary basement. And was like, what's he doing here? And scooped everyone else in the gallery. Incredible. Well done, bro. But he's got this follow-up story this week, which is that Judith Collins knew 78 days before our Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, that the FBI was going to be, well, that the FBI was going to be here and that they were going to set up a permanent office. And then Luxon was briefed only 6 days before Kash Patel arrived in the country. What's going on?
Yeah,
Like, that's like the kind of thing that should collapse a government.
that is
And like
wild, right?
major security intelligence briefing that for what, nearly 3 months, they didn't tell the Prime Minister.
And also, yeah, briefing, yes, but obviously the corollary to that is decision-making power, right? Who's making the decisions? Like, it's not just an information flow issue. It's not just a clear current resign because like the information wasn't in the right place at the right time style issue. It's like a deeper cut to the heart of our democratic institution. Like, who's making this decision?
Yeah, briefed about what? That he was coming just to do it? Like,
Yeah,
who made the decision that a permanent office was being set up? Because that's not
exactly.
in the story yet. We don't know who
Exactly.
made that decision.
Exactly.
My suspicion is that the US made that decision, and then Judith Collins was like, I guess it's happening. And that too should be something that just leads to an early election.
Hmm.
Like that should collapse a government.
That is
If
damning.
if another state, even like the most powerful country in the world who shares our values, whatever, leads Five Eyes, says we're setting up a permanent intelligence base for our Federal Intelligence Bureau in your country, and they hide it from the Prime Minister. They hide it from the Prime Minister. You can't say
For
like there's
months.
no other answer to like the Prime Minister not being told for 78 days other than they were hiding it from him, let alone the public, right? Like
Mm,
there are huge like questions about democratic mandate at that point.
mm.
Like, and basically every time Luxon gets up on the stage, he should just be hammered with this. Like, who made the decision to have the permanent FBI base? Like, do you think you had a public mandate to make those kind of decisions?
Mm.
Like any other time in history, like, well, no, that's not true. We've always been a vassal state of the US to some extent. But yeah, just wild.
But also
Um,
it goes beyond that. You're right. If you're a minister in this government, like you have tacitly signed off on being not just an economic vassal state of the US, but like an express subordinate militarily to the point where they can, without any democratic input, even any
yeah.
input, there's like it just shows that there's absolutely no leverage being executed on behalf of New Zealand at any level, because it's a one-way flow of information. Like what the New Zealand government at the moment hears is we are setting up an FBI base in your capital, and the remit of that FBI base is to counter Chinese influence in the region because that's what the US says it is. And Judith Collins goes, "Yes, sir. How high? Three bags full, sir." And
How
doesn't even
how
tell.
how long do you need me to keep it from the Prime Minister?
Yes, how long? Doesn't even tell the fucking prime minister or anyone. She just goes, "Well, obviously this is happening. This is, this is our job."
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Resign. Like that's resign worthy for all of them, obviously. But even if I were a minister in a government that did something so fundamentally detrimental and almost like traitorous to the entire like interests of my nation, I would be like, what am I doing here? Like, this is capitulation on a historic scale. Like, resign. This is not a government that is standing up for New Zealanders, even even beyond the remit that we normally talk about.
Is
In
it
a
like a
purely
macro
like
level, right?
yeah,
Like,
in a purely just like political science level. Like you're undermining your own state interests in a really like literal way.
yeah, the other interesting detail on here is that Todd McClay, the trade minister, didn't find out until the day the office was like he found out at the same time as the public, essentially, within within hours, like of when the public found out. And then got hit with 15% tariff as well. And he just had no clue that it was coming. Like, we are not even the executive is making
Exactly.
decisions about what's happening to New Zealand. Like the cabinet is not being informed, as far as we can tell. There are like two people, not including the prime minister, that are leading government policy on pretty meaningful geopolitical and issues of democracy. Like we're like that's like coup stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's
Like
our dynamic with the hegemon, right, is being dictated by them. And not, not in a way that involves any kind of negotiation. There is no negotiation, clearly. Because if there were, there would have been some kind of information flow. You can't have a negotiation without information, right? So there isn't a negotiation. There's a one-way set of instructions, and there's whichever minister gets told to do what on the day, doing the thing. And Christopher Luxon obviously doesn't give a shit, right? He doesn't care how many kind of hoops we have to jump through for the US or what the tariff is. If tomorrow the US said, you know what, instead of 15%, it's going to be 100% tariff on all New Zealand goods, what is Christopher Luxon going to do? Like he has no, to use Trumpian language, he has no cards, clearly. Otherwise, like he would have been at least informed that there was some conversation going on about this huge kind of dereliction of responsibility on behalf of the New Zealand public. It's disgusting. It's really like dirt, grubby stuff. It is like horrific. I can't remember anything during the key years that was this level of just like public abject capitulation.
well, I was gonna say, remember that was it late last year or early this year? It came out that there'd been a parallel security apparatus running out of NZSIS
Oh, yes, yeah.
from a foreign actor who I can only imagine is the
Who
US.
could it be? Who could it be?
And then no further details.
Yeah,
Like
that's right.
if you're listening to this, journos, some up and coming reporter could really make their name by giving us more information about that. But like this is a problem with access journalism in this country as well, right? We're a really small country, and a lot of journalists would rather just get the fucking readout from NZSIS and publish it verbatim.
Mm.
Like, oh yeah, like we've got evidence that X, Y, and Z and China are doing more disinformation in New Zealand now. Why are you believing that?
I think
Other than you've got a foot in the door
it's
because
X,
the
Y, and
NZSIS has told you so.
it's X, Y, and G, actually, Carl. That's how you get published. That's how
That
you get published.
sucks.
That's how you get published in New Zealand media. It's because we think that sucks that we're not successful journalists. And
Fuck. Well, then at least we get access to that Xi Jinping cash, right? Like
oh my God, it's
it's
so
just
wealthy and
rolling in it.
abundant.
Patreon sub in the summary. But and this is something we saw happen very clearly in the UK around the Snowden file stuff, right? Like
Mm.
that complete dereliction or that unburdening of the mantle of journalistic integrity by organizations like The Guardian to be like, okay, we've got a seat at the media table for MI6 now and MI5, and we'll take hammers to all these laptops that have the Snowden files on them completely performatively, and then kick off all our security reporters. And some forms of access journalism have a place, but if you're just being handed missives by our security services and they're saying stuff like, was it only how long ago was it that Rebecca Kittredge was using the term jihadi brides, right?
Mm. Mm.
Like this insanely often very Islamophobic, xenophobic, the complete ignorance of, or at least ignoring of, far right white supremacist threats,
Mm.
or like the meddling of our quote unquote allies. Like what is your point as a journalist? Like just let them do a press release. Let
Yeah.
them stand up at a fucking podium and get questioned by the press pack.
Yeah.
Don't just like, oh, thanks for handing me this. I guess I'm going to publish it verbatim. Like, oh, yeah, the NZSIS says that China's the biggest threat. Oh, I guess I got to trust it. I believe it. Like, what are you doing? Where's your suspension of your lack of suspension of disbelief? Really frustrating stuff. And
Yeah.
it's been really put on show again in Australia this week. right, with this little performance around expelling the Iranian ambassadors from Oz on the back of Australian intelligence agency information that they say. I think they even just use the words as probably, or something similar. Probably through a web of proxies, Iran paid criminal elements to attack a synagogue and a Jewish-owned restaurant. And like, can you give us a bit more detail on that?
Yeah.
I think it would have to be a lot more strong than probably, with a lot better evidence to just immediately expel Iranian diplomats. Personally,
It does seem like a bit of a leap, right? And yeah, I mean, I know the term like or the phrase Iran sponsors global terrorism, etc., gets bandied around a lot. But is this really what we're talking about? Like this, I don't know, local arson attacks? Like, is that what people think of? It's not exactly like I don't know. It's not
oh, it's
exactly
just
like
because it's just so discord in the community.
it's not exactly stealing a plane, is it? I mean, I don't know. Yeah, there's a sniff test element there that I'd like to see a little more kind of explicated than just saying, oh, if it was Iran, probably mumble mumble. And who knows? I mean, we're not saying it wasn't Iran. Who knows who it was? And it may have been like a disgruntled ambassador diplomat who personally did these things with no oversight. Who knows? It's a really kind of it feels like a fumble in terms of global geopolitics to make make that the kind of story. And the only reason I can see for it kind of strategically is as a distraction from the narratives changing in the Israeli relationship in terms of shoring up that dynamic where it really, I don't know, it's such small potatoes, surely, right? Like, I don't know, on the global scale, Australia is not as it's not a baby like us. Like they can do stuff. They have a commercial relationship with the United States. They're
And
buying
Israel.
in Israel, which are pretty significant to them. And maybe the fact that the Labour government is in charge right now and their supporters are changing tune quite a lot on Middle Eastern
You
relationships.
had a bunch of big protests recently.
Exactly. So maybe that's part of it. That's kind of the only narrative I can see making sense because we can see and you don't have to even open your eyes to see that it's not about fucking two anti-Semitic arson attacks. If I
Yeah.
mean if just imagine if this had happened 2 years ago, is that really what the Australian government would have done? I don't think so.
Yeah, and it's for me, it's the just taking it at face value. And
Mm,
we've seen a
yeah.
lot of commentators do this. We've seen people reporting on it do this. Members of the public, oh, but the Australian Security Agency surely wouldn't just make this up. Like,
One thing,
what?
one thing we know about spy organizations who hire people who are professional liars and then train them to lie better and are funded with no democratic oversight is that they tell the truth consistently and have transparency into their goings on. That's one thing that we know from great experience in geopolitical relationships.
It's just, it's really frustrating to see the way that like media in particular has been so captured by security interests, right? Like just taking it at face value,
Yeah.
like just ask some questions. At least, yeah, I don't know. I've
There's a
seen
time
very,
there is a time for just asking questions, and this is it. And there is a time for humoring potential conspiracy theories that seem to have evidence behind them, and this is it. Like, this is why I'm on my conspiracies are real and happen all the time beat, because this is the time to say, well, look, is that the story we're going with here? Like, is that the amount, given the position that we're in, given the global context, given the dynamic between all these relationships, and what we know about the past history of telling the truth on behalf of all of these actors? Is that really the story we're going to go with, guys? Like, I think if I was in a newsroom, I would at least be going, I'm not comfortable with this level of just, this level of information. And Iran and their proxies and spokespeople have all denied it. So are we going to both sides it in the same way that we both sides IDF propaganda? I'm not seeing a lot of headlines saying Iran says baseless anti-Iranian smears to blame for blah blah blah. Like not a lot of framing like that,
funny,
right?
isn't it?
Yeah. So, it's power politics. It's not journalism.
No. And not really much else to say about that.
No.
But it's becoming more blatant, right? Like it's
Mm.
becoming they care less about how it looks. They don't give a fuck about the optics. They're not talking to us, the public.
Mm.
They are talking to Israel and the US.
Yeah.
And I guess what the funny thing about it for what humor you can find in these situations is that it doesn't matter. Like just like the other week when Luxon misspoke to say that Netanyahu had lost it after not taking a similar line to Australia, Canada, etc., around recognizing Palestine as a state. He still got fucking dragged on social media by Israeli parliamentarians. Like,
Yeah.
and Netanyahu is still going after Anthony Albanese. Like, you're just not. They don't win. They win nothing from this. They're still going to like come under attack because they are trying to like put distance between themselves and what Israel is doing because they don't want to end up in The Hague.
Yeah. And Israel's not going to date you, bro. Like it doesn't. They're not going to start liking you now because, yeah, they because they've figured out that the cry bullying grievance politics 2025 is how you win
Well, that's how you appeal to liberals, right?
in this media environment. Exactly. So yeah, it's not, it's not going to change your dynamic with these countries one tiny bit. So yeah, it is baffling, right? Who are in these people's ears saying, you know what, we need to appeal to Benjamin Netanyahu's good nature because
Yeah,
that will
personally.
personally,
That's your electorate now. That's the only person.
yeah.
And then it doesn't even work. What they're doing doesn't even work. It's not even like their appeal is there's no meaning to it. Like
Hmm.
you're gonna get dunked anyway. Like what are you doing? You
Like I think the New Zealand government, as in terms of their reaction to this, has been, I don't know, heartening is a strong word, but it could have been worse. Like I think Luxon saying it's quite complicated is maybe the most honest thing he's ever said in his life. Like it's good that we don't just follow Australia down every fucking rabbit hole that their security services pass on to us,
yeah.
and don't immediately say, "Oh, we should also expel our Iranian ambassador on what word of mouth that some fucking third-hand Australian Secret Service person, unconfirmed report, etc., etc., is passed on to us."
Yeah.
That's good, but I mean, even the fact that we're kind of seen as Australia's little brother is not great, right? On the global stage. And as usual, like I think establishment media have more of a iron in the fire for this than even right-wing politicians do. Like they're more excited to see Iran criticized slash attacked slash literally invaded than even right-wing politicians in New Zealand are. So yeah, I mean, there's a spectrum for aggression on Iran, and not just Iran, but kind of global, maybe don't want to use the word subaltern, but like anti-hegemonic states of kind of perspectives on them. And at the far most hawkish side is our establishment media. And then after that is our right-wing politicians. And then after that is kind of right-wing liberals, which is wild, right? Like
Ludicrous.
establishment media is not in the majority on these issues. They are heavily, heavily, heavily weighted towards global conflict. And that loops back to what we were saying about before about Gaza and taking years to kind of even kind of notice that they're not in the majority. They're a tiny, tiny minority, and that's who they represent. And that doesn't like, even though their perspectives have shifted, I don't think that's a recognition that of any kind of population support shift. That's a change in the weather, right? The
Yeah.
entire the entire kind of spectrum of aggression on these issues has shifted, and they're still at the far right, I want to say, far hawkish kind of side of these issues. It's just that the far hawkish side has had to acknowledge the realities on the ground. It's yeah, the whole thing is wild.
Final thing I wanted to make sure we touched on is this uh, late or evening news drop of Neil Quigley, chair of the Reserve Bank, resigning effective immediately, and it being announced by Nicola Willis, not him, to say if he hadn't resigned, I would have asked for his resignation. Seems kind of untoward. I'd like, just to be clear, Neil Quigley is not a good person. He's not a good political operator. He's been clearly corrupt in the way he's dealt with Stephen Joyce around the Waikato Medical School, clearly giving public money to these consultants to get an inside track for government policy. I don't trust anyone at the Reserve Bank generally, but this kind of out of the blue is not probably not true, but like this sudden change in fortunes for him is still something worth noticing, right? In terms of how the right wing is operating within their own halls of power.
Internally, right? Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, I think you need to understand the fractures within the opposition. If you're left wing or if you have kind of critiques of the financial establishment, global finance capitalism, for want of a better kind of philosophical term, then yeah, you need to understand where the fractures are and like what the different positions are. And it's definitely telling. And I'm curious to see if this becomes as much of a news cycle as Adrian Orr. I suspect it won't, but it's just as significant in terms of what it says about the dynamics inside both that organization and its relationship to our government, actual like elected representatives. Because I think this is something we don't really get enough, we don't talk about enough, but also we don't get enough reporting on is the kind of unelected, the deep state, if you will, the like high-powered public service who continue to operate between governments and make really significant like policy decisions that have repercussions that change all of our lives and who operate for decades often in secret. I don't mean secret to sound pejorative, but without any kind of light
Without
being
transparency,
shone
right?
on their
Without
activities.
oversight
Transparency.
or without being reported on.
Yeah, and like these people are really important, right? The people who work at Treasury for 20 years and make decisions about where money gets spent and where it doesn't get spent have more of an impact on my life and your life than pretty much any MP, other than maybe the Prime Minister and some ministers over time, you know? Because between governments, those people are making decisions that look on the surface about quote unquote efficiency or quote unquote like priorities, but a lot of stuff goes under that rubric that makes a real material difference in where money gets spent. So, yeah, I mean, when the Labour government came in, they talked a lot about like the culture at these places, which I always thought was slightly a cop out, but sort of reaches towards something that's true, which is that like we have been, not to sound even more conspiratorial than I always do, but we have been kind of ruled by an unaccountable elite of bureaucrats since the neoliberal turn in quite like a unquestioned way, right? Like,
Yeah,
and
I mean the act set up to
yeah,
uh, force these institutions to work in certain ways
yeah,
that have continued to stay aligned to what Roger Douglas and Ruth Richardson did in the late 80s and 90s. Like that's just a fact. And a culture builds out of those rules and out of the people that are in leadership positions in those places, you know? And it replicates.
yeah, exactly. And if you fit into that culture, you succeed in those institutions, and if you don't, you don't. So it's not surprising that the kind of people who succeed and gravitate upwards and spend time in those organizations and with those people are the kind of people who fit in with that culture and with those expectations and hitting those KPIs because that's what it rewards. Like,
How
what
many
do you
people did we socially murder today?
well, what
Not
do you
enough.
expect? Not enough. Dial it up. Have you tried Kill the Poor? It's that culture, but for writ large. And yeah, it's interesting to see whenever there's this kind of this because of course these like internal shit fights happen every day, right? But when these things become public at a high enough level, it is interesting to see the ruptures that emerge.
And it's not like to underplay the damage that people like Nicola Willis and David Seymour and others are doing with their decisions, right? But there's an apparatus there that they are able to use and get these things done. Like, think about how easy it's been for them to pass all this stuff under urgency, to get like alignment with the ministries, the number of ministries, and other institutions that have obeyed in advance. It's because some of that culture is already there and ready to be utilized. And I think it's just remiss to ignore that fact. And so yeah, it's interesting when, one of these guys has been around for a while, who's clearly got National Party connections, to some of that old guard, is suddenly offside with the current crop
Hmm.
of national policy leaders, I guess. What
Decision
do you call it?
makers.
Yeah, decision makers. And the big question for me, given what we've seen in other areas like health and education, with New Zealand initiative linked people kind of being brought in through the back door, often like going around procurement rules, often not being vetted properly, often being vetted and then like this is not New Zealand initiative stuff, but like lobbyist stuff. In the case of the Human Rights Commissioner, being vetted, turned down, and then having ministerial, um,
Overruled. Yeah.
yeah, to put these people into positions of power. So what I'd be keeping a close eye on, if you are a commentator or just an interested member of the public, is who gets elevated to this role, whether there are any other appointments alongside it, and which lobbying groups they're directly connected to. Because the New Zealand Initiative in particular, which is the rebrand of the Business Roundtable, who were what do you say? The motivation behind the power brokers during the late 1980s, during euthanasia. They're the people who snapped up everything, who bought all the public service stuff that was sold off. They're still around, and they have direct connections to a bunch of parliamentarians currently. Nicola Willis used to be part of them as well as part of Fonterra, and as well as part of
All the best,
Foodstuffs. You know,
all the best organizations. Yeah,
this is not a government that's interested in governing for the electorate. It's a government that has direct connections and is being led by pretty radical right-wing junk tanks, right? Like think tank is not correct for a lot of these astroturfing groups. Like what New Zealand Initiative folks, I think it's Michael Johnston doing the curriculum stuff. It's just garbage. It's just ideological garbage,
yeah.
right? Like
It's propaganda, right? It's like it's a pretty effective for what they spend. I mean, these organizations, a lot of these quote unquote think tanks don't have big budgets. It's about their connections. But you don't need big budgets in New Zealand. You just need to be dedicated and have a small para-economic as opposed to paramilitary kind of wing for New Zealand's oligarchs. It doesn't take much. If you were focused, I think, think what we could do, listeners, with $1 million. We could influence the shit out of New Zealand politicians. You can get quite a long way by just bullying them on Twitter.
or just by being mates with them, honestly. And this is the thing.
part of the
This
job.
these organizations, they're so entrenched.
Yeah,
They're so entrenched. Like Nicola Willis has
mate, yeah.
been part of these organizations,
Yeah.
multiple of them, right? Like that goes a long way. And she knows she's got a job when she leaves. She's going to walk into one of these roles, no matter what happens to her, no matter
Absolutely.
how much of a failure she is perceived to be by the electorate. She is going to walk into a X million dollar board
Look at
role.
Ruth Richardson. She's not exactly scraping around for cash, is she? And where's her fucking public support?
She just got
That's the
a
job.
fucking Order of Merit, right? Like,
That's the job. That is literally your job. If that's what you come from these organizations, you're bought and paid for. It's skull and bones shit. You know what your destiny is, and it's to accumulate power, burn your public capital while moving actual capital upwards to your oligarch supporters, and then burn out and have a happy retirement for almost your entire adult life because that's how easy these people's fucking board jobs are. No, it's wild, man. And yeah, the entire Reserve Bank dynamic needs to be rethought. If you're a progressive, in any kind of sense of the word, I think we've gone far too far towards the childish kind of conceit that Reserve Bank independence is its own thing and it's not going to hurt us. But it is like I've enjoyed the fact that that's been kind of back in the news because it's been a long time since we've really talked about that, the monetary policy independence thing. So yeah, I mean the opportunity to have a new chair and Adrian Zor's resignation and this entire thing at least kind of opens space to have conversations about these Reserve Bank independence as a shibboleth. I think is worth talking about wherever you are on the political spectrum, but I think particularly on the left, if you want to reorientate government spending towards public good and doing stuff for people in the population, I think we need a bit of a populist reorientation. There was a really interesting interview that Bernard Hickey did with someone from the Reserve Bank debating the kind of merits of Reserve Bank independence as a policy and how far kind of along that spectrum and what are the good things and bad things, and that is a really useful conversation, I think. And even that is a more aggressive use of a journalistic approach than anything I've seen in establishment media, obviously. But it's important. I think this is stuff that the electoral left needs to think about before getting into power, not get into power and Grant Robertson your way into insignificance by doing nothing for fucking 6 years.
Who, sir?
Exactly. Well, fucking what did he change at the Reserve Bank? Yeah, but you know what I mean? It's like there's a coordination between monetary policy and government spending that just needs to happen. If we're going to fix our country from the 30 years of wasted time and corrupt upward trickle up economics that we've had. We just need coordination. We can't have the Reserve Bank destroying people's lives by changing interest rates independently, quote
And
unquote.
with intent, like this is
Yeah,
what they aimed to do.
yeah, deliberate recession, right? Like, shout out to Chloe for getting Adrian or whoever it was it Adrian Orr at the time, to admit that they were deliberately engineering a recession. It's like, yes, that is your job. It's your job to make a recession at the appropriate time. But doing that in an unrelated way to government spending is absolutely going to undermine the prospect of any kind of democratic push for more spending, shall we say. And we know we're in a huge hole in terms of every single infrastructure thing you care to name. We need to spend billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars over the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years to count to get back to where we were in the fucking 1990s, which
And
wasn't
this is for
exactly.
very basic like
Yeah,
infrastructure, right? Like this is like water and energy.
water pipes, energy, transportation, like just the most embarrassing basic shit.
Like the if it breaks, the society collapses.
Yeah, that level of like just maintaining our society, right? And if we don't do that, it's going to be hella expensive, but we shouldn't be in competition with the Reserve Bank to make those decisions, right? Like, if, yeah, I don't know, these counter-cyclical conversations I think are really valuable. And to what extent is coordination even possible when we have an incredibly powerful organ of government, which it is, it's part of government in a broad term, right? Like, it's governing us and it's massively changing the way that people make day-to-day decisions and investment decisions. And like the happiest I've ever seen most of these National Party ministers is when the Reserve Bank made a decision about interest rates. Like, you're not even doing your job; they're doing your job for you. Like, that's the vibe, right? It's
Yeah,
bizarre,
yeah.
and like it is true. Like, I'm not naive enough to think that there's no conflict, right? Like, there is a really difficult conversation about what will happen to inflation and therefore like the cost of living for working class people, because like it is measurably the case that countries that have politically overseen reserve banks have higher interest rates, sorry, higher, um oh fuck, what's the word, higher inflation on average, right? And that's not good for the working class. But we need to be able to plan infrastructure development and massive spending. So I don't know. Look at what Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico is doing right now, right?
Hell
Building
yeah.
massive amounts of infrastructure on like a historic level.
Talking about neoliberalism in the past tense. We love to hear it.
Oh, love that, right? But if we had a Claudia Sheinbaum in New Zealand, the Reserve Bank would go, no, thank you. Interest rates are fucked. And there'd be a massive uprising in terms of public support. Whereas Claudia Sheinbaum has like historic levels of support, in terms of her economic program from the Democratic base. So how do we replicate that? Like, I think we need to plan them. We, meaning the kind of the left who believe in elections in New Zealand, need to have this fucking sorted before you put out a program and not have it as a nasty surprise 2 months after an election, right? Which is 100% what I see happening if an actual left-wing government came into power in New Zealand right now.
Yeah, yeah. I think just to title up with some positive notes. This distance between the current ruling class and institutions and decision makers and the electorate is a huge boon for the left if they want to take advantage of it, right? If they're able to get a consistent, strong message out about the way they're going to help your average New Zealander, it should go a long way to ensuring that one, this government is out, but two, we see a much more progressive bent to the next government. Once again, we do hit the problem of Labour not really wanting to, but I think both the Greens and Te Pāti Māori can make a lot of hay here if they're able to, again, if they're able to get their message out. But it's just like there's the stuff on Palestine, obviously, but the cost of living stuff in particular, with the way where like it's becoming pretty common knowledge that both the banks and the supermarkets and the energy companies, all three of, are making huge profits. They're running at a loss and giving these huge dividends out to their shareholders, or they're pumping up the price of groceries and turning over $1 million a day, and the public knows that they're being shafted.
Mm,
Just say like, yeah, we're going to nationalize all the supermarkets. Obviously, like there's a scale of what you can sell to the electorate,
yeah.
but we're getting close to the point where people are that desperate.
I mean, we haven't talked about supermarkets today, but yeah, I just wanted to say quickly, like it rings pretty fucking hollow for Labour to be saying that National doesn't have a plan on cost of living through supermarkets. We've seen what your plan was for 3 years when
There's a
you're
policy bonfire.
it was fucking nothing, mate. Like Nicola Willis has done the exact same amount as Grant Robertson did as
Yeah.
finance minister, and I can't wait for her to do more Grant Robertson stuff for the next year until we get another fucking whoever. Yeah, no, it's bleak. It's bleak, and yeah, I have no time for people who are just saying like this is bad from the center left. Like, give us a plan. Give
Yeah.
us a
Yeah.
fucking plan. Like, is it break up the oligopolies? Is it create a state-run competitor? Is it an iwi competitor? Just tell us what your plan is, because we know that the national government's plan is continue to funnel money to billionaires and millionaires. So what's your plan? Like saying that that's a bad plan is true, but honestly, I don't give that any more credence than zero plan because
Actually, Philip,
I have no reason
we're
to
going to
believe.
release our policies closer to the election, and we don't want to give a hand away to National because if your opponent is shooting themselves in the foot, you just let them get on with it.
I will shoot you in the foot if you say that again, Carl.
But it's ludicrous, right? Like it's Labour are slowly like gaining support on the basis of how bad National is. They
Yeah,
could run over National right now,
yeah,
in my opinion. They
yeah.
could just be like, okay, fuck this. Here's our policies. We're gonna fuck National up. We're gonna fuck up the big corporates. But they're too in bed with these groups as well, and that's been proven over like successive governments, right? They're too scared of them. They want to be on side with business more than they want to be on side with the poor,
Yeah. And
and
if you
it's
if
it's
you
holding them back.
if you wanted a solution to actually address out of control cost of living run primarily by a handful of oligopolies and duopolies in New Zealand, they would be announcing a suite of cost of living policies, and they wouldn't be review cost of blah blah blah. That's Nicola Willis shit, right? It's the exact same policies.
Yeah.
It would be number one, nationalize Fletchers, obviously, infrastructure costs, entirely like vertical integration, build housing, build massive public housing at scale at cost. Number two, nationalize the warehouse and include groceries as part of its remit because it reaches every part of New Zealand. And again, produce at cost, local ingredients, blah, blah, blah. And number three, energy. Renationalize energy companies, have as part of their remit cost energy to New Zealand. And obviously, massive spending. But imagine what a boost that would be to New Zealand's productive economy. Like, at the moment, all of our money's tied up in housing. The amount of shit we could do as a country if you could go to the grocery store, your, warehouse adjacent grocery store, and get cost price veggies, and then go home and have power at cost price, and your home is fucking in competition.
Suddenly you're a consumer again.
You're a consumer again, right? Like the pace, the fucking velocity of money in that economy. My God. Like we're talking like Singapore growth speed. So that's my suggestion for any like center left policy wonk. Give me a
Yeah,
call.
like the thing is, and they just they want this to happen essentially because they could come out with some policies like this now, and you don't have to have them fully costed and blah 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 blah. You can go, this is what we're planning to do, right?
We will spend the
And
amount of money that it takes. That's my costing
because if
plan.
they were able to drive national under 30% over successive polling, the government collapses. Like it
Yeah,
just does
100%.
because
You
they just
think
won't be able
Winston
to maintain
Peters,
it.
you think Winston Peters is going to stay in a government that's polling fucking 40%?
No, absolutely not. And so there's like a strategic reason to do this, but they're not interested in that. They're interested in making things as bad as for people as possible so they can try to coast in like Keir Starmer did. It's horrific because it's a political strategy decision that is killing people. And Labour actually do have some responsibility to like lead the electorate on this. Just remember that the national government in part got in on a lie around their tax cuts, which were meant to give like $200 a fortnight, I think, to most New Zealanders. Absolute bullshit. It was called out after the entire political gallery had boosted it and said that they were eating Labour's lunch,
Brilliant.
etc., etc.
Brilliant
Um,
political move.
I mean, even if you're just fucking lazy, just start throwing out numbers like, Labour will make sure you got an extra $1,000 a month. Like, just fucking like. And because you can actually do that as well, by the way. You can actually create situations where that happens purely on food and power
Savings.
prices.
Exactly. I mean, look, the stuff we've already talked about. Like, what are people spending their money on right now? What I'm spending my money on is rent, groceries, power, water, the necessities, right? Like every
Yep.
fucking person is. So you just say, if you're an average working class person, this is your expenses. This is the amount we'll cut it
This is
by
what we see it coming down to.
nationalizing the necessities and providing
Yeah.
universal basic
This
services.
will put this much money back in your pocket.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's very, very easy.
And it would be huge. It would be huge because people's cost of living is blown out to a
Yeah.
crazy extent.
Yeah. It's actually, and power prices have just gone up, like as they always do midwinter for some horrible, horrific reason.
Hmm.
And again, it is
Capitalism.
so that they can deliver back to their shareholders. They're like giving that money away.
Yeah.
Like these are mo like what they're still 51% in government control and they're giving away $541 million or something to shareholders
Hmm.
and running at a loss. Like, what are you doing? Like, yeah, anyway. Left government, hopefuls, fucking do something. But the thing again as well, Labour being silent on this, it gives room for Te Pāti Māori and the Greens. Let's force Labour to take a more radical position or try and make them not exist anymore because they're not fit for purpose if they're not serving the
Either
working
way,
class.
either way is fine.
Either way is fine. That's been another episode. Thanks for joining me, Philip.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you for joining me. You know what? Thank you for joining me on this sunny morning.
It is
And
sunny, isn't it?
Photo.
Wonderful, wonderful. And thank you to our audience. Thanks for listening. Share, like, subscribe, Patreon link. Once again, in the summary, give us some money. It'll be like pocket change to us, to be clear, because of the Scrooge McDuck style vault of gold that we're about to go and swim in straight after this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's about feeling it in our hearts, knowing that we have your support is the main thing. We'll be back next week with some more current events. We'll catch you then.
If artificers are then I'm living a pointless life, but learning all your lessons. Fucking politics, there's no distinction. The road's upon now. It's paved with good intentions, and I'll admit that I'm at a loss for what to say when they quote this as a cost we ought to stay. 'Cause I live amongst the people every day. In this vindictive, forgetful fucking race.